Blessings, beloved. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but through him. Sometimes when we change our training, we can get injured. Speaking about the physical body, especially if we've never done that type of training before to the same degree, and if we're being required to use the body in a way that will expose weaknesses we have accrued or accumulated. Accumulation of time. We have found ourselves weak in an area that leaves us susceptible to injury, but until we actually do that new activity, we're not actually aware of that weakness. In other words, until you're asked to use the entire body in a compound way, why would you and how would you actually identify the weaknesses of that body? So what the trial that the Lord puts us through exposes in us is our weaknesses. It exposes to us areas we need to work on. It exposes to us what the enemy is all about, that they are worthless. There's nothing good in them, and that what God says about them is absolutely true. And as we'd expect, but in practice, when you've been told something, you can accept it, you can believe it, but when you've actually seen it, it brings on a whole new perspective. The demons working in and through people are no good. There's no good there. It's utterly desolate. Utterly desolate. Now they can even take on the form of loving, being loving. They can go through the motions of love, how they would manifest physically, in their mannerisms, body languages, but only pretentiously and superficially, only cosmetically. It doesn't reach them as spirits. Are being exposed to Satan's attack on us. As you would expect, when you're wrestling on the ground, you're using your whole body in a way that you've never used it before. And if you have built up one side of your anatomy more than the other side of the anatomy, if you're asked in some posture to utilize the entire upper body, the stronger side is going to pull against that weaker side, and the potential for injury is there. Generally speaking, we won't become injured, but we might be trained to an extent that it is very close to injury. I mean, if you had been trained any further, you would have been injured. And sometimes we train to the extent where it's to some extent incapacitating, but it's not injurious. It doesn't lead to a disability in the future. So what the Lord God has allowed is the enemy to come against us to the extent that sometimes we're even questioning, am I injured? Can I go on? Questioning, searching, am I injured? Oh. And whilst it might be tender and painful, is it an injury? Is it actually limiting my range of motion, my movement? And when you find it's not doing that, it's not an injury. You've been trained very hard to the point where your weaknesses have been exposed. And sometimes when we become very, very weak as a result of training, or very, very tired as a result of training, it shows us that we were overdoing something, or we were doing something that was not necessary to the extent that we were doing it. That's like repeating myself, but what I mean is two possibilities. One, you shouldn't have been doing that. Two, you were doing it to an extent that was inordinate. Understood? So what happens when you've trained a muscle? You switch, don't you? You train, you rotate. A gym instructor might tell you that. Train upper body today, lower body in a day's time. So your upper body today, or even if your training becomes more intensive because you become fitter and your recovery times improve, you might do upper body today and lower body tomorrow and upper body the next day again. Because now your recovery times are better. So as we get stronger and as we start to access greater ranges of movement in our body, greater mobility, we can realize further weaknesses in our range of movement. And then moving in that range on a continual basis will rectify that weakness by forcing it to become stronger. I say forcing, I don't mean to an injurious extent, but causing it. In other words, it must become stronger in order to facilitate that movement on a regular basis. So it's better to do something that is new to you with high repetition and lightly, so that you can innervate that area before you ask it to exert. So you're innervating and you're given nutrition to, and you're fueling and repairing. So what you're doing is you're housing all of the nutrients and encouraging greater amounts of nutrients to be sent to that area that you're now using on a more regular basis. Because oxygen is energy, oxygen is power. Water is energy, water is power, because water in an area or in a muscle has a force absorbing capacity. It dissipates, it absorbs, and force needs to be absorbed and then transferred to load as it attaches to the bone. So that we need to work on flexibility as well, because flexibility enables better absorption, because the muscle can move more freely within the range. So that it's absorbing the force better, and that it's not just force suddenly been transferred to load and you get an injury in your tendon or something. So we have to be able to absorb what's happening at a faster rate so that it doesn't overload us. So if we do overload, it's because we were behaving in a way that was too aggressive. Not aggressive in the sense that we didn't need to do what we were doing, but we were oversensitive to what we had to do. We were reacting in a way that was inordinate in the amount it was needed. So we were putting too much of a measure on it. And often we're behaving defensively in this way. We're resisting something that's coming against us. But even so, if we resist something coming against us inordinately, so what does a wrestler have to learn to do? A wrestler has to learn to economize his energy. Some of the fittest men in the world, they constantly run into this problem where they run out of energy, or they become winded early on in a fight. Well, why? Because they're not using their bodies correctly. Perhaps they're neglecting their cardiovascular fitness. They're not building their body for endurance. They're focusing too much on strength and mass. Whatever it is, they haven't ideally trained their body to facilitate what it is they're asking it to do. So what do we have to do? The Bible tells us very clearly, train your body for endurance. So if I'm training my body for endurance, I don't need to be pushing great loads. So if I don't need to be pushing great loads, that's not appropriate training for somebody who's training the body to endure. So you might be drawn to, in a wrestling match, use your energy too much. And a seasoned fighter will be giving you lots of stimulus to wear you out. He's not actually doing anything much. He's very gently and economically giving you lots of input to think about. And he's hoping that the input he's giving you, this doesn't take a lot of energy. Now, obviously, this isn't exactly, but it'd be transferable to some extent in wrestling, where you'd be lightly testing something. You wouldn't be putting all your energy into it, right? And what's that doing? Well, it's exploiting the inexperience of the younger fighter, because he's got youthful hubris, he's got strength, but does he have endurance, conditioning, and experience? Is he being wise about his fight? And the point is, this is not young against old, I'm just making the point that the enemy, Satan, is always trying to give input to cause you to react to it, to wear you out, and call you to overreact to it so that you exert yourself too much. So we do need to resist the devil, but we only need to resist him as much as we need to resist him for him to flee, because it's not our own natural power that's causing him to flee. So if I start to try to rely on my own physical power to cause him to flee, my own natural power to cause him to flee, well, that would be an inordinate exertion, because it's not my natural power that causes him to flee, but the word of God and the power of God working in me. So yes, I do need to resist, but to what extent? I only need to resist. I only need to resist. So if I resist him, he must go. How do I resist him? Spiritually. Make it very clear that I do not agree with him. I will not submit to him. He must flee. Resist the devil and he must flee from you. So remain calm. Don't overexert yourself. Don't be called by the enemy's camp to exert yourself too much, but rather train your body for endurance, and don't react all the time to the input from the enemy's camp. They're trying to give you all of that, getting you to react to that, hey, because they're at this over 1,000 years now. They're at it over 2,000 years now. So they've seen this, they've done it. They're doing it day in, day out for thousands of years. So what do we do? Well, when we realize that we've been doing something inordinate, we stop doing it. Then the body will recover. And if the body recovers, it might even recover stronger. Don't be tempted because of your increased level of strength to behave in a way that is beyond what you need to behave in terms of what you're exerting. So that as a fighter gets stronger, he shouldn't lean into his strength, but should rather lean back on his strength. And what I mean by that is, know that the strength is there if he needs it, but economize. Train hard, fight easy. Why do you train hard? Well, you use the training period to increase your strength, not your fighting period. Why? Because you're fighting for endurance. Fight intelligently. Train intelligently, but fight intelligently. In that, you're trained for endurance to last the fight should it go all the rounds. And don't react to the feints. You know, fighter will often do, and that's just to get you to react to a jab so he can get you with a hook. Okay? So he's asking you to react to that. Or he might even go some more of the way there. See, if he does that, you might tell, well, he stopped short. But if he goes a lot of the way there, you're willing to take the risk that he's not going to follow all the way through. And then you come with the hook. So he'll actually throw both at the same time in a sort of a flam or straddled manner. See? So that came over the top of the guard that would have come down to block the jab. So he's planning the reaction. He's planning what he'll do next based upon the reaction. So he's using probabilities. And that's what the demons do. So we're wrestling. Wrestling perfectly describes what we're going through. Of course it does, the Lord spoke it. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, rulers of the darkness of this present age and spiritual wickedness in the heavenly realms. Yes, when you first go onto the mat and you start resisting new degrees of weight that are being exerted upon you, you're going to find very quickly the weaknesses in your body. Why? Because they're going to ache. So as they ache, then you can extrapolate, well, these are my weak areas. And so very quickly, they'll be isolated because they'll be most sore. Because when you have to brace the body, specifically, bracing happens a lot in wrestling. When you have to brace, see that, look. If I have to brace, it's sort of an isometric contraction. You're resisting an immovable force in a way. Why? Because if you're just contracting, there's nothing moving. So it's sort of isometric, even though it's just a contraction. But the degree to which you contract determines the resistance against the muscle. Because how is that happening? Because your muscles are resisting against one another. And when your muscles resist against one another, because they must resist something, right? So when you contract even up the entire upper body and you hold it there for a time, you'll actually find which are the weakest parts of your body because you'll feel them the most. So that you'll learn very quickly, I'm weak there, weak there, weak there, weak there, weak there. Right? So I'm feeling the back of my shoulders here because I did my rotator cuffs. Right? So I'm finding it's weak there. Right? Or I'm finding that there's compensatory contraction there, which means muscles are taking too much of the contraction because they got used to doing that when the rotator cuff was initially injured. So now I have to ask them to stop doing that. How can I do that? Gently ask them to come back into the movement. So contract, release, contract, release. What am I doing? Teaching them how to release again. So that can be done with just contract, release, contract, release, contract, release, high repetition, or I can just do some input, which is sort of like a release, because you're asking the muscle to allow something to impose itself upon it. So it's having to give way to it, which is a release. So they're both asking the muscle to release. But gentle input, because if you go hard, then the muscle will contract again, brace to protect itself. So even though that mightn't actually be ideal if it was against a sharp implement or something, but we're not really designed to take sharp implements, so why would that be factored into the protective mechanisms of the body? But if you were to like lean up against a tree or something, the contraction would help you not to be perforated or injured by leaning up against the tree. So the point is, because you're drawing more water, more blood, there's more absorption of force even to the outside of the body. The point I'm making to you is that if you contract, and if you're forced to contract in a way that you're not usually forced to contract, which is bracing, brace for impact. Sometimes a person who's been in a little tip in the car will feel like they've spent 3 days in the gym afterwards. Like, whoa, I'm sore in this place, I'm sore in places I didn't even know I had muscles. Right? Because they're probably the places that you haven't been using. So that adequately describes it, doesn't it? So if you're contracting, you're going to expose the weak areas of your body. And it's probably going to be where a muscle grows into something, where it's rooted in something, attached to it. That's probably where it's going to ache the most. And I've been doing stuff that's been causing me to contract my upper body. And I feel where the muscle, is it the trap, the lower trapezius? Oh, that's the upper trap. What's that called? Anyway, it goes down the side of your ribs and into the bottom of your ribs and kind of, in there, real tender in there. It almost feels like I've never had a broken rib, but it feels like it might feel if you had a broken rib because it's inflamed there, obviously. Tender. So if I sneeze, I can feel it. So the point I'm making to you is sometimes we overdo it. And what we have to learn to do is just do it enough so that there's least debilitation, the least amount of debilitating pain or discomfort in the muscle when you have to go about your daily activity and continue on. So you're training the body for endurance means that you're training it to endure what you're asking it to do. So you have to train it to be able to do a little bit more than you're asking it to do. So that you can do what you've been asked to do well enough. Train hard, fight easy. Okay. So learn as a Christian to train for endurance and don't react to everything Satan has done, every input. Because then they'll try to exploit that too. Oh, we got one in on you there. And will that annoy you or frustrate you? Well, that will use energy. So why would you give energy to your enemy for free? Because it's things that you would give to your enemy that he'll conquer you by. Give nothing to your enemy. Resist him. He must flee from You give him your arm, he'll take your arm, he's going to bend your arm. Give him nothing. Resist him. Firm in the faith, knowing that he must flee from you. Resist the devil, firm in the faith. What does that mean? Trusting in the word of God and what he has spoken. Resist the devil and he shall flee from you. Doubt it not. He just talks, but he has to flee. Blessings. If you want to be saved today, put your faith in Jesus. He will train you. Discipline. He will train you a lesson by the trials and the persecutions that come against you. Blessings. I love you. Turn to Jesus today. The Bible says in Romans 10:9, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved.